Margaret shuffled nervously into the sleek, glass-walled office, her worn coat hanging loosely from her frail frame. The air smelled of polished wood and expensive cologne, a sharp reminder that she did not belong. Her cane tapped lightly on the marble floor as she approached the front desk. Richard, the top salesman of the corporation, looked up from his papers with a smirk. "Well, well," he said, voice dripping with sarcasm. "Look who decided to enter the world of business. Do you even know where you are?" Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line, but she held her head high. "I'm here for an appointment," she said softly. Richard laughed, drawing attention from the nearby employees. "An appointment? With who?" "The cleaning staff?" Victoria and James, two of his colleagues, snickered in unison. The humiliation was immediate and sharp, filling the room with cruel energy. But Margaret's eyes twinkled faintly with a secret no one could see. She had spent a lifetime mastering the intricacies of corporate strategy and leadership. And while they laughed at her today, tomorrow, she would not just walk back into this office, she would walk in as its new CEO. Margaret walked into the office that morning with her cane tapping lightly against the polished marble floors, a rhythm almost drowned out by the soft murmur of expensive conversations and the clicking of high-end laptop keyboards. The glass walls reflected the golden sunlight, the way it glinted off chrome furniture, making the entire space seem untouchable, reserved for those who considered themselves part of a higher echelon. Every detail screamed wealth, efficiency, and superiority. She adjusted her worn coat and straightened her shoulders, preparing herself for the day that promised both challenge and derision. Richard spotted her immediately, leaning against the sleek reception desk with a coffee in one hand and a smirk that had been honed over years of belittling others. "Well, well, look who's wandered back," he said, projecting his voice so it echoed across the office floor. "An old lady thinking she belongs in a place like this. Do you even know what a boardroom is?" His words, deliberate and loaded, drew several employees toward the scene, their curiosity piqued by the spectacle he had orchestrated. Victoria, a sharply dressed woman with eyes like knives, and James, tall and smug with a permanent sneer, exchanged glances before joining in. "Maybe she should stick to bingo," Victoria said softly, loud enough for Margaret to hear, though she maintained her calm exterior. James added, "Or perhaps knitting circles are more her speed." Laughter erupted, a collective sound of office amusement at someone they considered beneath notice. Papers rustled, chairs scraped, and pens tapped the desks as if punctuating each insult. Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line. She felt the sting, yes, but allowed it to slide past her like water over stone. Inside, a calm storm of thoughts brewed. She considered each mocking word, each condescending glance, and catalogued them meticulously, not in anger, but in preparation. Richard, seeing that her silence was not yielding the reaction he desired, escalated. He called over a cluster of interns and junior staff, gesturing toward Margaret as if presenting a rare exhibition. "Everyone, observe how not to conduct oneself in a professional environment," he said, exaggerating his tone. "An example of what not to do, right here in the flesh." His colleagues laughed again, some discreetly, some openly, taking mental notes to share at lunch. Margaret approached the huddle with serene composure. She greeted each person with a polite nod, her voice steady and clear. "Good morning. I am here for my appointment." The simplicity of her words contrasted sharply with the chaos of mockery around her. While Richard had expected stammers and flustered replies, she delivered clarity and dignity. He handed her a complex set of financial reports, designed to confuse and embarrass her in front of the gathered staff. "Go ahead, old-timer," he said, his smirk widening. "Explain these numbers, if you can." Margaret's eyes skimmed the reports, absorbing every figure, every misalignment, every irregularity that spoke to inefficiency within the system. She noted errors in formatting, discrepancies in revenue streams, and anomalies in client data. Her mind, trained over decades of business experience, worked rapidly beneath the surface, converting humiliation into insight, mockery into opportunity. Meanwhile, whispers spread through the office. Some employees watched with skeptical amusement, others with barely concealed intrigue. Who was this woman? How could someone so quietly composed command such subtle attention? Yet, Richard's laughter dominated, drawing attention back to the narrative he had constructed. Margaret addressed him directly, her voice calm but measured. These figures suggest areas for operational improvement. I would recommend reevaluating client portfolios and standardizing reporting procedures to enhance accuracy and efficiency. She pointed to specific sections, her gestures deliberate and authoritative. Richard blinked, momentarily caught off guard. His smirk faltered just enough to reveal a flicker of uncertainty. But the office's laughter had not ceased. Victoria whispered mockingly to a coworker, "She thinks she can teach us business?" Adorable. James snickered, flipping through another stack of papers with exaggerated boredom. Margaret endured it all, each insult sharpening her resolve, each laugh a reminder that the world often underestimates wisdom cloaked in humility. Hours passed. Margaret moved through the office, navigating obstacles designed to humiliate her, misfiled reports, missing access credentials, emails sent to the wrong departments. Every challenge was a test of patience and poise. Richard continued his campaign of subtle torment, issuing instructions with double meanings, assigning tasks impossible to complete under the public gaze, and reveling in her perceived failures. The employees watched, invested in the spectacle, oblivious to the mind quietly absorbing strategy and weaknesses in their system. By the afternoon, Margaret had mapped the entire office structure in her mind, the strengths and weaknesses of the staff, the cracks in leadership, the inefficiencies Richard had taken for granted. Each moment of humiliation became a note in her mental ledger, a strategic blueprint for the reversal that would soon unfold. As the day drew to a close, Margaret stood quietly by the exit, a picture of composure amid a room steeped in arrogance and superficiality. The employees departed, leaving whispers in their wake, certain that the old lady had been a harmless source of entertainment. Richard left with a sense of triumph, convinced his dominance had been solidified. Margaret stepped into the fading sunlight, her mind alive with plans, her heart steady. She had endured the public humiliation, catalogued the weaknesses of her adversaries, and prepared the groundwork for the next day's revelation. Tomorrow, she would not return as the figure they laughed at, she would return as the one in charge, the orchestrator of change, and the embodiment of undeniable authority. The seed of transformation had been planted, and its roots were already taking hold beneath the polished floors of the office. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the corporate office, glinting off chrome accents and glossy wooden floors. Margaret arrived early, her cane tapping in steady rhythm as she navigated the pristine hallways. Her presence immediately drew attention, as whispers rippled through the staff like a current, each echo carrying speculation, amusement, and curiosity. Richard, perched confidently at the reception desk, spotted her instantly. His smirk was sharp, his eyes gleaming with the anticipation of public spectacle. "Well, look who's back," he announced, his voice slicing through the murmurs. "Are you sure you can handle this, or should someone help you with the forms?" The surrounding employees leaned in, sensing a performance of superiority and eager to witness Margaret's response. Victoria and James, his collaborators in arrogance, exchanged smirks and whispered jabs. "She looks like she's lost," Victoria said, loud enough for a few others to hear. "Maybe a crossword puzzle would suit her better than a boardroom." James chuckled, adding, "Or perhaps knitting would be her best contribution." Laughter erupted across the office floor, a tidal wave of derision that seemed to bounce off every glass wall. Margaret, though, moved forward with serene poise. Her eyes flicked over Richard and his accomplices, cataloging their expressions, their body language, their weaknesses. Every sneer, every whispered insult, every exaggerated laugh became a piece of the puzzle she would later use to reverse the power dynamic in this room. Richard handed her a stack of documents, reports intentionally misfiled and riddled with inconsistencies. "Go ahead," he said, his tone a blend of mockery and challenge. "Show us that you can handle real business." The crowd gathered, some curious, some eager to laugh, others secretly wondering if she might hold a hidden depth. Margaret began reviewing the reports with quiet intensity. Her eyes scanned each figure, each anomaly, each error. She quickly identified gaps in the company's processes, inefficiencies in reporting, and overlooked opportunities in client management. Her mind worked like a well-oiled machine, transforming the humiliation into intelligence, the challenge into an opportunity. Every error Richard had set up as a trap became a map for her eventual triumph. The staff watched, some with skepticism, some with barely concealed intrigue. Margaret noticed subtle hesitations, overlooked details, and patterns of carelessness. Richard, confident in his narrative of superiority, didn't notice the seeds of doubt beginning to sprout among those who observed quietly. The interns and junior employees, initially snickering at Margaret, found themselves distracted by her focus and composure, questioning for the first time if the mockery was warranted. Richard's humiliation plan escalated. He instructed Margaret to navigate complex software programs, assigned her conflicting tasks, and orchestrated miscommunications that made her appear flustered. Each obstacle was a carefully crafted test designed to provoke public embarrassment. The laughter in the room grew louder with every moment of feigned confusion, reinforcing Richard's sense of control. Yet, for Margaret, each mishap was data. Each smirk and sarcastic comment was catalogued for later use. She noted who in the office was competent, who was easily manipulated, and who would likely falter under pressure. Every interaction became a thread in the tapestry she was quietly weaving, preparing to unveil her mastery at the precise moment. As the day wore on, Margaret endured repeated insults, subtle traps, and public humiliation with unwavering calm. She offered polite clarifications, corrected minor errors in reports without fanfare, and maintained an unbroken composure that contrasted sharply with the frivolity and arrogance around her. Every action, measured and deliberate, reinforced her inner authority even as outward appearances suggested vulnerability. By afternoon, Richard was confident he had successfully humiliated her, gathering a few co-workers to praise his cleverness. "See? I told you she couldn't manage the numbers," he whispered smugly. Yet, beneath the laughter, there were glimmers of unease among some employees, small hints that Margaret's silent competence had begun to register. Margaret left the office that day as she had entered it, unassuming in appearance, but internally resolute. She had catalogued every weakness, observed every arrogance, and mapped every procedural flaw in the company. Each moment of derision had been a test, each laugh a lesson in the culture she was about to transform. Her mind was alive with strategy, plotting the steps to ensure that the next day would not be another round of humiliation. Instead, it would be the day of revelation, when her decades of experience, strategic insight, and network of influence would come to the forefront. Richard and his cohorts believed themselves victorious, unaware that the very dynamics they used to belittle her had become the blueprint for their own undoing. Margaret walked home that evening, her cane tapping steadily along the sidewalk, her mind focused, her heart calm. She reflected on every interaction, every sneer, every joke at her expense, turning them into lessons and plans. The world had underestimated her, dismissed her, and laughed at her appearance. Tomorrow, they would witness the unveiling of the true authority that had quietly existed all along. She was no longer the old lady they had humiliated, she was the strategist, the planner, the inevitable future leader who would reshape the hierarchy and command the respect that had been so casually denied to her. If Margaret's quiet strength and strategic mind have inspired you, take a moment to reflect on your own hidden talents. There's power in patience, wisdom in silence, and strength in resilience. Share your stories in the comments below, times when you turned adversity into opportunity, and connect with others who understand the value of persistence and clever planning. Don't forget to subscribe to follow Margaret's journey and witness more stories where underestimated individuals rise to incredible heights against all odds. Every like, comment, and subscription fuels more tales of triumph over arrogance. The morning sun reflected off the skyscraper windows as Margaret stepped into the corporate office with a quiet confidence that belied the chaos of the previous day. Richard, still brimming with arrogance and confidence from his prior humiliation of her, barely glanced up from his paperwork. He believed the old lady before him could never rise beyond his carefully constructed hierarchy of mockery and derision. Margaret moved with deliberate grace, her cane tapping lightly against the polished floors, each step measured and intentional. Her eyes swept the office, observing staff and senior employees alike, cataloging their behavior, noting subtle weaknesses and overlooked potentials. In a matter of moments, she had mentally mapped the entire office hierarchy, identifying gaps in workflow, flaws in communication, and vulnerabilities in leadership that had gone unnoticed for far too long. Richard leaned back in his chair, a smug grin spreading across his face. "Well, if it isn't our little office visitor," he said, voice dripping with condescension. "Did you bring your knitting basket today, or will you be attempting to read these reports again?" Margaret responded with serene composure, "I am here to review the company's operations and discuss strategic improvements." Her voice was calm, authoritative, yet gentle, a contrast to the brash arrogance around her. A hush fell over the office as she approached the main boardroom. Staff who had laughed at her the previous day now sensed an unexpected gravity in her presence. The documents in her hands, meticulously organized, were not only precise but highlighted areas for optimization that even Richard had overlooked. Every spreadsheet, every report she touched radiated confidence and competence. Richard attempted to assert dominance, barking out orders and attempting to interrupt her analysis. "Let's see if she even understands basic finance," he muttered, his colleagues stifling chuckles, expecting another moment of embarrassment. Yet Margaret anticipated each interruption. With subtle but unwavering authority, she guided the meeting, correcting inefficiencies, pointing out strategic oversights, and presenting data with clarity that left even seasoned managers astonished. She addressed the room with a calm precision, highlighting mismanaged client portfolios, pointing out redundant processes, and offering innovative solutions that streamlined operations. Each recommendation was backed by decades of experience, delivered in a tone so measured that Richard found himself unable to interject. The employees watched, rapt, as the old lady they had dismissed demonstrated not only understanding but mastery over the very systems they thought were secure. Richard's smirk faltered as whispers began circulating among the staff. Even his allies, Victoria and James, leaned closer to exchange subtle glances of unease. Margaret's calculated composure and strategic insight were shifting the room's perception, turning amusement into respect and mockery into awe. By mid-morning, Margaret had not only regained control of the room but had established herself as the quiet architect of operational authority. Her analysis revealed inefficiencies, illuminated opportunities, and suggested leadership adjustments that were immediately actionable. Every observation she made exposed the arrogance and superficiality of those who had mocked her, including Richard himself. She concluded the initial phase of her presentation with a gentle yet commanding assertion: "The systems here are capable of greater efficiency, higher profitability, and sustainable growth. My role is to ensure these objectives are realized." The room, once filled with laughter at her expense, now sat in stunned silence, acknowledging the undeniable competence that radiated from her every word and gesture. The first ripple of change had begun. Margaret had turned humiliation into authority, mockery into respect, and doubt into validation. What had started as a day of derision transformed into a public demonstration of skill, strategy, and leadership. The stage was set for the next phase of her spectacular turnaround, the moment when the underestimation of one woman would culminate in an undeniable shift of power within the corporation. The office, once filled with whispers and laughter at Margaret's expense, now held a tense, charged silence. Employees glanced at each other in disbelief, their previous amusement replaced with a mixture of awe and apprehension. Richard's confident posture wavered as he realized that the woman he had humiliated was commanding attention in a way none of them had anticipated. Margaret walked slowly through the rows of desks, her presence authoritative yet unassuming. She addressed employees individually, asking probing questions about workflow, client engagement, and operational challenges. Each inquiry revealed gaps in processes and highlighted areas where efficiency could be dramatically improved. Staff members who had previously mocked her now responded with careful, attentive answers, recognizing her depth of knowledge and commanding insight. Richard tried to interject, attempting to regain the upper hand. "Are you sure your suggestions are practical?" "This isn't theory class," he said, a note of unease creeping into his voice. Margaret smiled gently, her voice steady and persuasive. "Theory is only valuable when applied correctly." I am not here to speculate, I am here to identify tangible solutions and implement them effectively. Her calm confidence made Richard's objections seem petty and small, and the murmurs among the staff reinforced the shift of authority toward her. She continued her walk, pausing to review spreadsheets displayed on computer screens. Without hesitation, she highlighted discrepancies, corrected errors, and demonstrated alternative strategies to optimize revenue and client satisfaction. Each correction was executed with precision, leaving employees astonished at the clarity and decisiveness of her actions. Victoria and James exchanged worried glances. The smug assurance they once carried had vanished. Margaret's knowledge and decisiveness left no room for mockery or arrogance. Her quiet authority became the center of attention, reshaping the office dynamics in real time. Employees who had doubted her competence now found themselves listening intently, eager to follow guidance from someone they had underestimated. By midday, Margaret had conducted an impromptu review session that revealed not only inefficiencies but also the latent potential within the team. Each employee, previously complicit in Richard's humiliation campaign, now saw Margaret as a leader, capable of both vision and execution. Even Richard's allies could no longer dismiss her competence. They were forced to confront the fact that she was transforming the office culture before their eyes. Margaret addressed the group with a final statement for the morning. Every organization has strengths that are overlooked and weaknesses that are ignored. Identifying and addressing them requires insight, patience, and the courage to act decisively. I am committed to bringing those strengths forward and rectifying the weaknesses that impede progress. The room, once filled with laughter and derision, now sat in contemplative silence, each individual processing the magnitude of the transformation occurring. Margaret had taken the first decisive steps to convert humiliation into triumph, and the energy in the office reflected a profound shift. Respect, recognition, and the anticipation of her ultimate leadership had begun to permeate the space. Richard's discomfort was palpable. Every attempt he made to regain control was met with subtle but firm redirection from Margaret, each correction eroding his previously unchallenged authority. His colleagues could see the balance of power tipping inexorably toward the woman they had once mocked, the underestimation of her abilities now becoming a lesson in humility and the unexpected force of true competence. The afternoon approached with Margaret systematically implementing strategic observations, her demeanor calm but commanding. Employees who had laughed yesterday now sought her guidance, aware that the same person they had underestimated was orchestrating a transformation that would solidify her as a figure of undeniable authority within the company. By the end of the day, the stage was set for the climactic revelation of her ultimate power, assuming her role as CEO and fully overturning the hierarchy Richard had arrogantly defended. By late afternoon, the office had transformed into a theater of revelation. Employees who had once whispered and laughed at Margaret now watched her every move with rapt attention, recognizing a command and authority that demanded acknowledgement. Richard, usually the center of office dominance, found himself increasingly marginalized, his arrogance faltering against the quiet mastery she exhibited. Margaret entered the boardroom, documents in hand, and began a comprehensive review of the company's operations. Her analysis was thorough, pinpointing inefficiencies, revenue gaps, and leadership oversights that had gone unnoticed. She proposed actionable strategies, each rooted in decades of experience and real-world application, delivering them with a calm, persuasive authority that silenced any skepticism. Richard attempted to interject, trying to maintain his supremacy. "I don't think these measures are feasible," he said, his tone losing the usual sharpness. Margaret met his gaze steadily. Feasibility is determined by understanding and execution. With clarity and the right implementation, these strategies are not only possible, they are necessary for sustainable growth. Her words carried weight, and the room, including senior managers, nodded subtly, acknowledging the truth behind her assertions. She guided the team through each department's workflow, highlighting areas for immediate improvement. Staff who had previously mocked her were now engaged, asking questions and offering insights, their respect growing as Margaret validated and amplified their contributions. Her ability to combine strategic vision with interpersonal intelligence elevated her presence from that of an overlooked visitor to a recognized leader. Richard's facade cracked further as Margaret unveiled her long-term plan, showing a path for both operational efficiency and enhanced market position. The staff, witnessing the transformation of their daily environment and the clarity of her strategic thinking, began to see her as the rightful authority. Even Victoria and James, initially complicit in the mockery, understood that their assumptions had been disastrously misplaced. Margaret concluded with a confident yet unassuming statement: leadership is not about asserting dominance, it is about guiding vision, empowering others, and ensuring results. This organization has untapped potential, and it is my role to harness it. The silence that followed was not emptiness but the weight of undeniable recognition. The shift was complete. The woman who had been humiliated the day before had established control, her intellect, experience, and calm authority now unquestioned. The employees, once entertained by her perceived incompetence, now absorbed every word, every gesture, realizing that the underestimated individual before them had entirely reversed the hierarchy. Richard, stripped of his presumed dominance, could only watch, powerless against the precision and foresight of Margaret. His arrogance had blinded him, and now, in the wake of her decisive leadership, he confronted the uncomfortable reality that humility and skill can triumph where ego and mockery fail. The final moments of the workday saw Margaret's influence solidified. The office's culture had already begun to shift, aligning with the competence and insight she demonstrated. By turning humiliation into a stage for her own mastery, Margaret had orchestrated a spectacular turnaround, proving that strategic patience, intelligence, and quiet resilience can dismantle arrogance and command respect effortlessly. The climax of her transformation was not a moment of loud triumph but a calculated, undeniable assertion of authority that left the entire office in awe and anticipation of the formal recognition that would soon follow. The corporate office, once echoing with laughter at Margaret's expense, had transformed into a space of stunned reverence. Employees, who had earlier indulged in mockery, now moved with quiet attentiveness, their eyes reflecting respect and cautious admiration. The shift in authority was palpable, emanating from Margaret, whose calm confidence and strategic brilliance had rendered Richard's arrogance impotent. Richard sat at his desk, slouched and disoriented. The once commanding voice now faltered, and each attempt to assert control was countered subtly yet decisively. His colleagues, Victoria and James, exchanged uneasy glances. The arrogance that had fueled their mockery had been exposed as superficial, and their self-assured demeanor faltered in the presence of Margaret's composed authority. Even senior managers, previously skeptical of her, now nodded along with her recommendations, acknowledging the depth of her expertise and the accuracy of her insights. Margaret moved gracefully among the staff, offering feedback, validating contributions, and integrating suggestions into her overarching plan. Her interactions were marked by humility and strategic foresight. Each correction was precise, each directive clear, and each acknowledgement of effort genuine. The employees, witnessing the transformation, responded with an eagerness that had previously been absent. What had begun as public humiliation had become a masterclass in leadership, revealing the power of intellect, patience, and quiet determination. Richard attempted a feeble objection. "Perhaps my approach could still be valid," he started, but Margaret's steady gaze and measured tone cut through immediately. "Authority is earned through results, clarity, and respect," she said calmly, "not through intimidation or mockery." The room absorbed her words, recognizing the truth and the reversal of power that had unfolded over the course of 2 days. Victoria, who had once whispered sarcastic remarks, now listened intently. James, previously smirking at her, now furrowed his brow in realization. Margaret had not only corrected procedural inefficiencies but had also illuminated weaknesses in interpersonal dynamics and decision-making that had gone unaddressed. Each intervention she made was a lesson in both operational excellence and professional integrity, reinforcing her position as the emerging leader. By mid-morning, the entire office had embraced a new order. Margaret's plan for operational improvement was systematically implemented, and the staff, motivated by her calm authority, executed tasks with precision. Her ability to merge strategic insight with emotional intelligence created a seamless environment of collaboration and efficiency. What had been a hierarchy dominated by arrogance and superficial judgment had now been replaced by a culture of competence, respect, and thoughtful engagement. Richard's discomfort became more pronounced with each interaction. His attempts to reassert influence were continually met with subtle redirection, illustrating not only his personal failings but also the broader lesson: leadership rooted in humility, knowledge, and strategic foresight surpasses ego-driven authority. The employees, observing these interactions, internalized the shift in power dynamics and the essential truth Margaret exemplified: underestimated individuals often possess the vision, resilience, and expertise to achieve extraordinary outcomes. By the end of the morning, Margaret had secured her place as the central authority within the company. The transformation was complete. Those who had mocked her were humbled, the staff respected her, and the office functioned with newfound efficiency and clarity. This public reversal of fortune underscored a timeless lesson: patience, intelligence, and integrity can triumph over arrogance, prejudice, and superficial judgment, establishing Margaret as not only the rightful leader but also the embodiment of a subtle yet powerful justice that resonated throughout the office walls. The evening settled over the corporate office, the sunlight casting a warm, golden glow across the polished floors, reflecting the transformation that had taken place. Margaret walked slowly among her staff, her presence calm yet undeniably commanding. Every step was deliberate, each gesture purposeful, reinforcing the authority she had quietly claimed. The employees, who had once whispered and snickered at her, now observed her with a mixture of admiration, respect, and awe. They hung on her every word, noting the precision with which she guided projects, addressed inefficiencies, and validated their contributions. Richard sat at his desk, slouched and unsteady, his usual arrogance stripped away. Every attempt he made to assert dominance was met with calm redirection from Margaret, leaving him increasingly marginalized. The humiliation he had inflicted the day before now reflected back upon him with a harsh clarity. Victoria and James, too, felt the weight of their earlier mockery. Each sarcastic remark, each whispered joke, now seemed shallow and meaningless compared to the gravity of Margaret's leadership. They exchanged glances, silently acknowledging that they had misjudged the woman before them. Margaret held brief, focused meetings with individual departments, walking each employee through operational improvements, client management strategies, and workflow optimizations. She highlighted errors that had previously gone unnoticed, pointed out redundant processes, and offered actionable solutions, all while maintaining an approachable demeanor. Staff members, previously reluctant to contribute, now offered ideas eagerly, their respect for Margaret deepening with each interaction. Every suggestion she implemented was a testament to her strategic foresight, and each acknowledgement of employee contributions reinforced the culture of collaboration she had nurtured. The office atmosphere had transformed completely. Where once there was laughter and derision, there was focus, efficiency, and a newfound sense of purpose. Margaret's calm decisiveness had replaced the chaos created by arrogance and superficial judgment. The staff, motivated by her presence, executed tasks with precision, demonstrating the profound shift in dynamics. Even the senior managers, who had initially doubted her, now relied on her guidance and insight, integrating her strategic recommendations into company operations with careful attention. Richard, desperate to regain footing, attempted to challenge a proposed operational change, citing potential risks. Margaret addressed him without anger, her voice steady and commanding. Authority is earned through clarity, foresight, and results, not intimidation or superficial status. Every process I recommend has been vetted and designed for efficiency and sustainability. Her words, measured and firm, resonated with the entire office. The staff, witnessing the confrontation, absorbed the lesson: competence and humility far outweigh arrogance and ostentation. Victoria, reflecting on her own behavior, realized the extent of her misjudgment. Her earlier mockery had been rooted in bias and superficial observation, and now she observed Margaret not just as a superior, but as a model of strategic thinking and leadership. James, similarly humbled, felt a mixture of shame and enlightenment, understanding that underestimating someone based on age or appearance is a costly mistake. Margaret's leadership extended beyond immediate operational improvements. She initiated mentorship moments, guiding younger employees through complex decision-making processes and emphasizing critical thinking. Each interaction demonstrated that respect is earned through wisdom and empathy, not status or intimidation. Employees previously sidelined now found themselves empowered, their potential recognized and fostered under Margaret's guidance. The consequences for the antagonists were subtle but profound. Richard's credibility had been irreparably undermined. Colleagues no longer deferred to his opinions automatically, his prior dominance had been dismantled through her quiet yet undeniable authority. Victoria and James experienced professional and personal humility, understanding the superficiality of their earlier judgments and gaining a lasting respect for true competence. The culture of arrogance that had pervaded the office was replaced with one of diligence, collaboration, and thoughtful leadership. As the day concluded, Margaret walked to the center of the office, pausing to observe the quiet hum of productivity. Her staff worked efficiently, communicating respectfully and supporting one another, a living testament to the transformation she had orchestrated. For a moment, she allowed herself a reflective smile, acknowledging both the justice served and the responsibility she now held. The woman who had been humiliated and underestimated had become the guiding force of the organization, her authority recognized, her insight respected, and her vision clear. Margaret left the office that evening, her cane tapping a steady rhythm along the polished floors, the setting sun highlighting the serene satisfaction on her face. The lessons of the day were profound. Resilience, intelligence, and humility are formidable forces, capable of transforming mockery into respect, doubt into admiration, and underestimation into undeniable triumph. Margaret had restored balance, enacted justice, and returned to her authentic self, proving that true leadership is measured not by dominance or appearance, but by wisdom, integrity, and the capacity to elevate others while asserting rightful authority. The office was no longer a stage for ridicule but a testament to her enduring competence and strategic mastery, leaving an indelible impression on everyone present. Margaret's journey from humiliation to triumph is a powerful reminder that true strength often lies hidden beneath humility and patience. If her story inspired you, take a moment to reflect on your own hidden talents and the moments when perseverance and intelligence can turn adversity into opportunity. Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Let's create a community that celebrates resilience, strategy, and the courage to rise above underestimation. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow more stories where underestimated individuals transform challenges into victories. Every comment, like, and subscription helps support these narratives of empowerment, reminding us all that quiet competence and unwavering determination can achieve the extraordinary.